Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to It's Obvious Gaming. My name's Garrett Drake, and I was in the mood to make a video. It's been quite some time, probably over a year or more, since we've done a video outside of just the video version of the podcast. I don't even you can call it a video version anymore. It's just the audio with a thumbnail, which is pathetic. It's sad. Frankly, heart-wrenching, because we used to be very passionate about our video content on this channel. It was once our dream to see it thrive and grow to a point where we could do it full-time, but unfortunately life happened, and this is where we're at now. Anyway, the reason I'm making a video is because, again, yes, it has been a while, and secondly, I'm a massive fan of Rift Apart. It is probably one of my favorite games I've played in the last several years, and I think that's for multiple reasons. It really is a nostalgia trip in some ways, because I loved action 3D platformers as a child, notably Insomniac's Spyro the Dragon. Year of the Dragon especially was my favorite in that original trilogy, but I've always loved games like that, and I miss them. We don't see many of them anymore, but I'm glad Insomniac is keeping that genre alive and exceeding at that, because Ratchet Clank is a series that I was pretty late to, honestly. I mean, the 2016 remake really was my introduction to the series. I'd always known about it, but I'd never played it. Couldn't tell you why, but I'm glad I'm here now, because both the 2016 remake and Rift Apart are phenomenal to me. Platinum both of them, and the reason being is just because I had relentless fun with both of them. So prior to Rift Apart coming out, I had long hoped that Insomniac would not just remake additional Ratchet & Clank games that I'm still up for playing at some point if I get my hands on them, but that they would just start an entire new sequel from the ground up, and that's exactly what they did for PS5, and I could have not have asked for anything more than they gave us. Between the graphical presentation, of course, I mean, it's clear to anyone who's played it, especially if you actually played it versus just seeing it on YouTube or a stream or something. It is truly a marvel to look at. What's insane is that we're still at the onset of the PlayStation 5's life cycle, so I imagine same with PS4, graphics are only going to continue to improve. I just can't get over, of course, the entirety of it. The colors, the art style, the animations are ridiculously impressive, but it's like the finer details that have really blown my mind. I mean, from the fur on Ratchet and Rivet to the textures on weapons and the lighting effects and environments, and both on the faces of characters. Another wild aspect is just how much Insomniac is crammed onto the screen in any given environment, from Nefarious City with all the flying ships, which really does put Night City to shame from CD Projekt Red. I feel bad in saying that, but it's the truth. I know the systems aren't nearly as broad and as demanding as Cyberpunk, but just from a graphical presentation, it is insane what Insomniac's done with a futuristic city. And you have to forgive me, I can't remember all the names of the planets off the top of the head, but each one in its own unique way has just things in the environment, in the sky boxes, and draw distances that are just so much to marvel at. I would just find myself stopping to stare at it and take photos for 20 minutes at a time just to admire and appreciate it. But that's what I loved about it. I mean, each individual world is not only remarkably diverse from the other, but you feel wholly enveloped between the NPCs that you can both interact with and just that are surrounding you, doing interesting or funny things. And even down to all the nooks and crannies you can explore were always satisfying, it was fulfilling, and I love that the collectibles in the game really give you a reason to go after them other than just saying you collected them for the sake of a trophy. I can't even remember if the gold bolts in the 2016 remake actually had perks attached to them, but that's what made them so exciting to seek and find in Rift Apart, was that each gold bolt had some kind of funny or unique perk to either liven or spice up the gameplay, whether it's making your head tiny or huge, or changing the filter on screen, or altering the look of your melee weapon, music packs, photo packs. I mean, there's so much packed into that just made tweaking the game here and there for fun just all the more interesting as I was playing. On top of that, the armor perks as well was pretty cool. I thought it was really awesome how many armor sets were actually in the game. I was not expecting that at all. I mean, I think that's why this game, I don't know if it's blown everyone's mind in the same way that's blown my mind, but I really didn't look into this game much prior to release. I watched the one demo they did at the State of Play a few months ago. I'd seen a trailer or two, but aside from that, I really had not looked much into it. I hadn't read anything about it, so I was relatively blind going into it. So everything I found and discovered, from planets to armor sets to collectibles, was all a huge surprise for me. And honestly, that's a rarity these days, because usually I go into any given game that I anticipate playing with a relative knowledge or insight into what I'm getting into. I think that's a testament to the faith that has been built up in me and Insomniac, is because they have not, at least in my experience, not failed us once with games they've made in the last several years between Spider-Man and Ratchet & Clank. So, but with the planets in particular, something that was both initially frustrating but also a great feeling in the end was that I was so focused on trying to 100% complete each planet before I moved on to the next, being entirely unaware that I'd be back for additional story, aspects and just new opportunities for side missions to complete later on. I didn't realize backtracking would be part of this game as well. So initially I wouldn't say I glitched my way into some areas I wasn't supposed to access yet, but I would so frustratingly be trying to find areas of the map that I hadn't discovered yet, thinking there'd be some sort of collectible there, that I would force my way into them. And once I arrived, there's nothing there for me to do or to find, and I was so confused as to why it was there. And I was actually questioning, I'm like, why would Insomniac put this here if there's nothing to find? So that being said, as I progressed through the game and allowed the game to really play itself out at its own pace and not my own, I discovered that not only were there more diverse areas that I was hoping to see, but there were new opportunities to go back to areas and find collectibles or new story points that would take you to those areas I once tried to discover, which I thought was hilarious. But the first few planets aside from Nefarious City, I was a little concerned because I thought, man, like we have sort of a like a swamp planet, we have the Night City style planet, we have a active volcano planet, and specifically when I originally felt a little concerned was when I'm playing as Rivet and you get to the Fixer planet where the big robot is and he fixes the whatever that stone is for the Dimensionator. But when I was there, it felt a little too similar to the planet that I was at before, so I started to think, man, I would have loved if there was like a rainy planet, like a thunderstorm. I would have loved if there was like a snowy planet and a tropical planet. And it's funny, again, I was just thinking ahead and my ambitions got the better of me. But shortly thereafter, you go to that tropical planet with Ratchet and Kit, which when you hit those dimension stones turns into the snowy planet, which was a combination of both I had hoped for, which is like an oceanic planet and a snowy planet wrapped in one, which I thought was awesome. Also got some Bioshock vibes from going underwater there, which is pretty cool. And of course, beyond that, when you go rescue Ratchet and Kit, Rivet gets to explore that nefarious base or hideout, whatever it is, that's in the middle of a rainstorm. So I got every weather type and biome that I'd hoped for, which is funny because, again, I was just thinking too far ahead, and that was really cool to see later on in the game. Before I talk about combat, I want to talk about some of the more extracurricular, for lack of a better term, activities you could do on planets. Like riding the Speedles was a ton of fun. Also riding, I can't remember the little like dragon creature's name on that one planet where Rivet's from, but getting to fly that around and capture all those stones that it wanted to eat or whatever for a side mission was so much fun. And the way they implement that into the gameplay later on with like the big epic battle at the end was just so cool. And I think that's what I really appreciated about Ratchet and Clank, or at least Rift Apart, was that not only is the combat just incredibly fun all the time with the vast array of weapons, the way you can upgrade them, and just the fluidity of it and how beautiful it looks in 60 frames, but on top of that, there are these little moments throughout the game that really break up what could be monotonous. I think even without these extra gameplay aspects, I would have still very much enjoyed the game, but I think that's what really helped it stand apart from the 2016 remake was you have these rocket boots where you can zip around the wide open maps that you have to explore. You have the little bug robot that takes care of like the infected gates or something. I can't remember what it's called. I can't even remember her entire purpose, but I didn't love those sequences, but it was cool with the DualSense features. That felt really awesome, and they had their own little unique challenges that were thankfully brief and again broke up just that continuous flow of combat. I will say I didn't love Ratchet and even Kit's toward the end, their little puzzles. They were never frustrating, they weren't overly difficult, but I just found them a little tedious. I don't think I enjoyed them enough to say I would want them again in an additional game. I don't think it makes sense in another game, but there wasn't enough platforming, there wasn't enough action, which I realize there's plenty of that in the core of the game, but I just didn't really love solving the puzzles. I'd rather just be shooting something, but again, didn't hate them, but they're probably my least favorite aspect of the gameplay. But when it comes to the primary moment-to-moment gameplay, I mean, the platforming is more glorious than ever. I mean, it's one thing to just jump from platform to platform, but the new addition of the dash, which is a just gorgeous animation that is fun to use in both traversal and platforming and combat. But of course, swinging with your little grapple hook, running along walls, grinding, and then using the specialized boost swings, whatever those things are called, combining all those in like major sequences is just so much fun. And some of the most breathtaking moments of the game had to do with combining all those traversal mechanics into one. And especially when they took the Titanfall dimension time shifting mechanic and you're bouncing between dimensions as you're combining all those. And again, it wasn't super challenging, but it was very stimulating to say the least, because you're solely focused on your timing and dodging carts flying at you or obstructions on grind rails. And I just found those so much fun. And then immediately like bouncing into an area and continuing to fight enemies is just exhilarating. I loved it. I was not expecting to have the amount of weapons that you have in the game. I mean, 2016's remake had quite a few as well, but I think you have 2 or 3 full wheels of weapons to choose from, which I will say I have my favorites. There's some that I could honestly do without, but for the most part, all of them in some way, shape, or form are of course useful, but I guess it just is player choice and what you prefer to use. But I think some of my favorites were, just from what I can remember, even just the standard blast rifle. I mean, toward the end of the game, it's relatively ineffective, but it's always reliable when you need it in a pinch. Fully upgraded too, it's pretty deadly. The Enforcer shotgun, upgraded all the way, is brutal. I love it. Glove of Doom was awesome. Also, those little plant amoeboid, like mushroom gunners were helpful too. All the little minions you could call out were great. Can't remember the name of the rocket launcher or the sniper or the electric gun, but those are 3 more of my favorites, also incredibly helpful and deadly. You essentially get the BFG 9000, and toward the end of the game, I can't remember the name of it, but it basically opens that dimensional rift and stuff falls through and destroys everything in its path. So many to the point where I'd literally have to just pull up the game and read them off to you, but all in all, a ton of fun. Loved just the continual drip of new weapons at each new area you get to, each new planet. That always made arriving to a new place very exciting. Knowing you have a whole upgrade path for these weapons, and they're fun initially, which is great, but they become just increasingly fun as you upgrade them. And even having platinum the game, which is one thing I wanted to touch on with the platinum, I both appreciate and was surprised by, is that you don't actually have to upgrade every weapon to 100% for the platinum. And if I remember correctly, in 2016 you did. And I felt by the end of the game, once you completed everything, which it really was prior to completing the game, impossible to upgrade all the weapons 100%. It was a little tedious and frustrating to have to put in that extra time just to upgrade them when you'd already beaten the game. So I think you only had to upgrade the shield weapon to top level to get a single trophy, which had to do with using its special ability or something. But that's what I loved about the trophy list, is that none of them were too demanding. Nothing overstayed its welcome. As much as I love the game, I'd love to play through it again on challenge mode, even not earning trophies with all the new weapons and even the ones you unlock in challenge mode exclusively. That's kind of what I stand for when it comes to earning platinums. As much as I love trophies, I think they're awesome. I've decided in the last several years I'm only going to platinum games that I just have a ton of fun with, and this was one of them, and thankfully it did not demand too much of me as a player, so love that. Some of the boss battles were pretty interesting too. I like fighting that big centipede for the first time. It was pretty cool. You fight it multiple times throughout the game, but that was fun. It was always fun fighting those little mini, I guess you could call them a mini boss, sort of just a bigger enemy. Those T-Rex enemies were cool. The final battle at the end was pretty epic. I will say the final sequence was surprisingly intense. Really creative and visually impressive boss fight too, with Emperor Nefarious and his big, I don't know, like Megazord suit. Thrusting his face and his fist through rifts to reach you across the city was a pretty cool thing to see. And I think the only thing I really wanted to talk about were the characters, because I mean, I think Ratchet and Clank, as always, were awesome. I mean, I think they're great together. They're hilarious. I love their camaraderie, love their heroism. But the standouts for me are easily Rivet and Kit both, because I thought Rivet just generally is not only just a really cool character, from what little history you get, even between her and Kit and how she got a robotic arm, and that drama there was a bit of surprise to me as well, because the majority of the game is comedic. But I thought just Rivet was adorable. Like her mannerisms and the way she speaks and her motivation and encouragement toward others, I just thought was adorable. Kit, all the same, was adorable, and her confliction with her past and grappling with what that meant for her present and how it affected those around her was a surprising dramatic edge that I was not expecting. And I think that's what's most impressive with the writing in the game, is that it's very goofy and silly for the most part, but they managed to ride the line of hilarity and a heartfelt narrative that was very effective for me toward the end. To see two-dimensional characters with Rivet and Ratchet come together and be friends and work together in the end, and seemingly continue to hang out and be pals throughout the credits, which is cool. Really loved it. I thought the characters were great. Both Emperor and Dr. Nefarious were hilarious to see interacting with one another, and just the various dimensional characters that were reflections of other characters from Ratchet's world. And I don't know if it's fair to call this a disappointment, but the fact that Rivet and Ratchet played exactly the same, I understand that they're dimensional equals and they share arsenals and whatnot, but I always thought initially when the game was shown off that Rivet would, one, be a playable character, but play a little differently from Ratchet, whether she had different traversal mechanics or a different arsenal of weapons that made playing as either of them a little more unique. I imagine those conversations were had in pre-production for the game, but I think ultimately they probably made the right decision, because I mean, if you have certain weapons with each character, it may or may not get a little frustrating if you're in a certain scenario where you want to use, say, a shotgun and Rivet doesn't have a shotgun, or vice versa. Could be frustrating. So I would have liked to see a little more diversity between the characters in terms of gameplay versus just their personalities. The last thing I wanted to talk about were the DualSense features. The triggers for each gun were entirely unique. At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep them on, I think it's called experiential and functional. Because initially I thought pulling some of the triggers for the weapons were a little exhausting, but I eventually got used to it and loved the way that each weapon felt entirely different from the other. And the only part of the DualSense features that I don't think were done quite as effectively as they maybe could be were the footsteps. I mean, I really like feeling footsteps in Returnal. In this game, it's cool, but I found that it doesn't always keep up with each individual footstep, especially when you're sprinting. And the reason I know it's not entirely accurate is because I've played Astro's Playroom, and it is perfect in that game. With whether you're skating on ice or walking on different materials, each footstep is totally in sync with either handle of the controller. Whereas in Rift Apart, it's not entirely accurate, which really wasn't a problem because I still enjoyed having that sensation. But I feel like in an update, maybe they could further refine that feature to be a little more accurate. Anyway, I've been rambling. This has been totally directionless, and I've probably forgotten 100 things I want to talk about, but it's enough for me, and I'd love to hear from you. If you've played Rift Apart, if you've beaten the game, if you platinumed the game, tell me what you love, what you hated, if you hated anything, what you've disliked. I'd love to hear from you guys. Again, this has been the first video we've done officially on the YouTube channel in quite some time, so I'm not expecting a whole lot of engagement, but if you are watching, at the very least, if you're willing to support the channel, please give it a like, subscribe for more, and ultimately share your thoughts in the comments below. And let me know if you want to see more videos like this, especially with Jacob and Preston. We can probably make it happen. I know I can always do them, but getting us together may or may not be a challenge depending on the timing. But please let me know. But again, my name's Garrett Drake. Thank you for tuning in. We greatly appreciate your continued support for It's Obvious Gaming. New episode of the podcast coming very soon, and we'll see you guys on Discord.